I am Dez, and I have the privilege today of catching up with Jan Karlsson. How are you, Jan?
I'm very well, thank you.
Thanks for making time to catch up with us. So firstly, for folk who may not have the privilege of knowing you, could you perhaps just quickly introduce yourself and tell us about your role here at Ericsson?
For sure. So my name is Jan Karlsson. I'm in charge of BSS globally in Ericsson.
Tell us what that business unit does for the organization.
So we develop, we lead product management, we lead services, so global end-to-end responsibility for BSS.
So BSS is Business Support Systems, yeah?
Correct.
So inside the organization as a whole, what are the touch points for business support systems for folk who are not overly familiar with what business support systems are?
So basically see it as the system that makes the monetization possible, makes the provision of subscribers possible for an operator. So you have the network, you have the core network, the radio network, core network, but BSS systems are essential for monetization and provisioning.
Right. And so by business support systems, or effectively you're the infrastructure and the lifeblood of the actual business systems that deliver the services, that capture the billing, the logging and so forth.
Exactly.
How did you come to be at Ericsson?
I was in Ericsson a long time ago. Then left. Joined a startup which got acquired, joined another startup which I was CEO for, and then I got a call. I left that startup and got a call, why don't you come back to Ericsson? They gave me a mission, this is what we want you to do, and I said, sounds appealing, yeah, I can do that.
Great. Yeah. You know, in many ways there's a lot to be gained from someone who knows the culture and the behavior and the history of the company, and then get out and get a breath of fresh air.
Correct.
And then come on back, because you've effectively reinvigorated your mind and your thinking, you brought back new ideas, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So when we think about Ericsson as a company that's been around for 140 years, I think 1891 from memory, there's a cultural fabric that gets existed, and sometimes it's hard to shake it off. What are some of the challenges you see when you come back into an organization like this, where you've been out and had a breath of fresh air and come back? What sort of challenges you faced in coming back in the organization, bringing new thinking, and then in the process of getting into this role of business support systems? How's that been?
So two comments. I first came back to market area, out in the regions basically, and there I felt I'm at home, because it's very business focused, facing competitors, trying to win the business. I feel not a big difference compared to what I was used to. In HQ, it's different. Right. It's a little bit slower compared to a startup, naturally.
Indeed.
But now with an end-to-end accountability, I also feel very much at home. Very similar to the CEO job I had before.
Okay. Yeah. In many ways, I was listening to an analyst recently talking with your CEO, and there was a phrase that came up, I don't know who I can quote using it, but essentially there's this idea that Ericsson was a startup within a legacy company, and was essentially bootstrapping from within itself across multiple business units. And I imagine that the business support systems world you head up has that same challenge, that you're bootstrapping, you're bringing agile and I guess more nimble thinking, but still you've you've got this big organization supporting it around you. I see that more as a strength than anything now, because in a startup world you don't always have all that support infrastructure. You're out on a limb. Here you've got startup freedom, but you also got the supporting infrastructure around you.
Absolutely. So I think software is the most powerful innovation tool that you can have, and if you implement microservices, if you implement API first, you can really free up a team, which can be 5, 10, 15, within boundaries, very similar to a startup. So I think if you do things well, you face a good chance of being able to compete, like you said, with the benefits of the big company, but with the agility of what software can bring to you.
Yeah, it's interesting that listening to some of the colleagues today, and certainly in the last 3 to 5 years, I've seen this interesting re-emergence of a lot of design patterns that we've had for decades. When you think about Docker and Kubernetes and containers, once upon a time, and this is aging me, but when I was a teenager working on mainframes, we used to call them batch jobs and LPARs, right? And so in many ways we've kind of gone full circle, but of course with the latest and greatest technology we're doing it in a leaner, keener, faster way. The other interesting thing that I'd be keen to get some insights on is, are you finding it the case that when you build from a design pattern point of view and across all the business support systems you're building, are you finding that the whole fail and fail fast thing is actually working for you? Is that bringing about rewards, or is it only part of the puzzle? I know it's a big question, sorry.
No, it's a big question. I think it requires discipline. It requires transparency. It requires if you do things right with transparency, absolutely, absolutely, and it's fundamental to, instead of going through a 2-year waterfall, to be able to adjust as you go along, including initiatives. That was not a very good idea. Let's try another approach. I think so, but it requires. It's more, applying software development tools, but also the management discipline of having the transparency, seeing where things are, and being able to judge, based on progress. But yes, I think so too.
Actually, I love that insight, because I'm seeing that around the world as well, where you've got large organizations who are Prince2 or PMBOK, and they've got very rigid methodologies from program delivery, delivering new innovations. But inside those, they still need a little bit of flexibility, so they kind of carve off this free thinking brain, and they might run multiple, A/B test, if you like, a multivariate testing, try 2 or 3 things and see what works. But at the same time, they've got 10-year thinking, 5-year thinking, but they've also got to do iterative spin-outs. When you're building something, I'm sure you're refactoring code all the time, you're deploying new things, and when you go to microservices, you have that pets versus cattle thinking shift as well, which is not always something that's possible in a big company.
Absolutely. So we have, I think it's not just microservices, Kubernetes, etc. It's also CI/CD. It's also the whole, instead of seeing product and services as being completely different silos, how to capitalize on both, how to deploy in a much more agile way. Having a perfect software which then takes a year to deploy, that's not very smart. No. So how do you do this across the board? And now with the setup that we have, which includes product and services, it's, again, I feel accountable, and I feel that I have the end-to-end responsibility basically to improve things compared to where they were before.
And I think that's on par with what I'm saying globally as well. Like when you talk CI/CD, so continuous improvement, continuous development, because you've got I guess pressing demands from consumers who want the celebrity experience, and so you've got to meet that immediately.
Correct.
You've got the business asking you to develop more functionality.
Correct.
It's particularly as we're leading towards IoT and IIoT and cloud and big data and analytics and cyber breach, cyber securities. These are really exhausting things on their own right. When you put them all together, they're crazy. But then you also got continuous development, where you've got version 1.2, and then 2, and you've got that living, breathing, agile component. I think it's a really exciting thing. We saw some interesting things just a moment ago in a demo with one of your colleagues who did an astounding job of explaining a very complex challenge. But one of the things that was really interesting, and I'd love to get your insights on this, is through all of this, there's essentially a consistent component of 2 things. It's the network and infrastructure, all the magic pieces that Ericsson does as an organization. But above that was like the services driven by data.
Correct.
And so the data followed the services. So whether it was the demo where we saw someone doing in-game spending to top up their data,
correct,
or whether it's somebody who might be just driving an autonomous vehicle and getting it as a service or whatever, that must be an interesting challenge, particularly when you've got the likes of not just the EU-US data shield and then the European adjustments to that, such as Switzerland and other countries, but now you've got GDPR and the supply chain challenge with that. Are there any insights you could sort of share that you've gleaned from facing those challenges that maybe aren't behind the firewall?
I think so many existing BSS systems are defined for yesterday's business.
Right.
You'd be surprised. And you're basically locked. You want to launch new services, monetize on new business models, but you can't, because the BSS system is holding you back.
Right.
And I think
it's kind of like landlocked.
Basically, and our responsibility is to, of course, support yesterday's business models, but also tomorrow's. And I think the system that we have developed is very, very much. It's not even locked down to telco. It's really how do you work with OTTs? How do you work with utilities capitalizing on different business models or ecosystems compared to what you have right now, and also doing it instead of knocking on Ericsson's door. I have a change. Can you help me? No, being able to give the configurability to the operator or the partner that they choose to do that. So it's I think it's transformational.
It's gonna be a fun challenge.
Plus the cloud nativeness, plus the real-timeliness, plus all the other enablers. But it's really oriented to monetizing on new business models, tomorrow's business models more than yesterday's.
I think that's really the goose that lays the golden eggs. If you've got a business mind and a technology mind, they're going to apply themselves to where in the value chain can you monetize,
right.
And not just for the sake of grabbing money. But if you can I find that if you can add value, invariably money follows value, right? So consumers will see the value, ergo they're willing to pay for that at the right price point. And if you can do that at a platform, almost in a market space, like a marketplace sense, and then others can add to your marketplace and platform, you're going to then monetize much more rapidly if you can be agile.
Absolutely.
Look, thank you so much for making time to chat with me. It's been a pleasure getting to know you. It's been a pleasure to see some insights on what you're up to, and I look forward to keeping a very close eye on what your amazing team is up to. You certainly have some great colleagues in the colleague who was just there giving us a demo on some of the platform that's in place now, and I suspect that you're going to, in many ways, drive the trend globally on where telcos and partners are going to work with business support systems.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. So folks, this is Dez. We're going to wrap up there. So you've got some great insights on what's happening with BSS, Business Support Systems, inside Ericsson, and we look forward to keeping up to date in the future on what's happening next. Thanks a lot.